Hi guys, it's me, Mrs. Stubbs, and I am going to be reading Chapter 1 and Chapter 8 of Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. Now, I've already been explaining to you that this is a parody. He's poking fun of knight tales during this era. And we're going to be introduced to a character, Don Quixote, who is a little bit on the delusional side. So Don Quixote is a man who decides that he's read all these tales about knights and he wants to become one. Unfortunately, his vivid imagination causes him to fight with windmills and have a lady of the night as his damsel in distress. She's not in distress, though. Bless his heart. That's how we would say it here in the South. Bless his heart. So something else that you need to know is that I'm using a translation because it was written originally in Spanish. And so some of the wording of it, he uses, the translator, John Ormsby, uses actually some obscure meanings for some of the words. So I'm going to be pausing and talking about that a little bit as we go on. Okay. Now, what I want you to keep in mind as I read is he a sympathetic or an unsympathetic character? Remember that a sympathetic character is one that we empathize with. We're kind of like, yeah, I get it. Or is he unsympathetic? Is he somebody that we're like, dude, he be crazy? That was not good Englishing. Don't repeat that. Okay, another thing that I want you to think about is we have a normative character in this, a character that basically is the author's voice. And in this respect, our normative character is also a foil. And remember that a foil is a character that contrasts with another character. His characteristics and attributes directly contrast with another character's. And in this case, our normative character, who is also our foil, is his apprentice. And his apprentice isn't really an apprentice. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Because he's delusional. He'd be crazy. But there is a character who serves as his voice of reason. And let me see. His name is Sancho Panza. Sancho Panza. He's following this delusional crazy man around because he's bored. And he gets free food and drink. So he's living the life, living the life. At least they're getting out of their house and traveling around. Something we don't get to do lately. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading. Chapter 1. Do y'all hear that? That's my crazy dog barking. Chapter 1. Which treats of the character and pursuit of the famous gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha. In a village of La Mancha, the name of which I have no desire to call to mind, there lived not long since one of those gentlemen that keep a lance in the lance rack, an old buckler, which is a small shield, a lean hack, a horse used for riding, and a greyhound for coursing, hunting, an olla, a jar, of rather more beef than mutton, a salad on most nights, scraps on Saturdays, lentils on Friday, and a pigeon or so extra on Sundays, made away with 3/4 of his income, so he spent most of his money on his food. The rest of it went in a doublet, basically a prehistoric wallet, a medieval wallet. Yeah, a fine cloth and velvet breeches and shoes to match for holidays. While on weekdays, he made a brave figure in his best homespun. So his other money went into a pouch, and all he had left were his clothes on, his fine clothes, his Sunday clothes, and then his regular everyday clothes that someone made for him. He had in his house a housekeeper past 40, a niece under 20, and a lad for the field and marketplace who used to saddle the hack as well as handle the bill hook. So basically had a woman who cooked for him and cleaned house. His niece lived with him, but we don't really know a lot about her. And then we have a young man who takes care of the outside and does all the shopping for him. The age of this gentleman, the one, our main character of ours, was bordering on 50. He was of a hardy habit, spare. Okay, hardy in this case, let me just pause there, means someone who is rash, someone who doesn't always think. He's still healthy, and also implies that he's healthy. Spare, meaning that he was lean. Gaunt featured. Now, gaunt can sometimes mean skinny, but it can also mean plain and unattractive. So there wasn't really anything in his appearance that wasn't. See, this is part of the parody, because blah, 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 blah. My lips are tripping over my teeth and my lips and my tongue. That's so sad. Anyway, so this is part of the parody. Now, at this time period, there was a very well-known Arthurian writer. Arthurian meaning King Arthur. And there was a story by Sir Thomas Malory that was written about the death of King Arthur. And it was called Morte d'Arthur. And in this story, there is another story about a knight called Bowman. And Bowman literally means beautiful hands in French. So apparently he was a very good-looking guy. And that was another quality about knights, is that they're attractive in appearance. Okay, and that's something that you don't always get when you're talking about chivalry and the code. You know, you had to be of royal descent. You had to be brave. You had to be willing to do menial service. And there had to be some miracle involved, a damsel in distress. And you had to defeat some... what's the word I'm looking for? Magical sense of a foe. Okay, so keep all this in mind. So the fact that Don Quixote, and another thing was most knights were younger. So this guy is older. I wouldn't say 40's old. I mean, maybe I would, since I'm only 20. Yeah. And he is not very attractive. Bless his heart. He is gaunt featured, a very early riser, and a great sportsman. They will have it, his surname is Quixada or Quixada. For here there is some difference of opinion among the authors who write on the subject. Although from reasonable conjectures it seems plain that he was called Quezana. Now this is very important because this is part of that farcical thing. Bowman's wasn't known as Bowman's. I mean, that was like a nickname. He had some other name. So once again, you see him going back to making fun of Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur. I really wish that we had read that, but you don't get to read that until British Lit. What's my hair doing here? But keep this in mind when we get to British Lit, because that's going to be important. This, however, is of but little importance to our tale. It'll be enough not to stray a hair's breadth from the truth in the telling of it. A breadth is width. That's talking about the width of something. You must know, then, that the above-named gentleman, whenever he was at leisure, which mostly was all the year round, gave himself up to reading books of chivalry with such ardor and avidity that he almost entirely neglected the pursuit of his field sports and even the management of his property. So he was so busy reading, he didn't get stuff done that he should have gotten done. And that was one reason probably why, field sports, that means his hunting for his food, which is why he probably had to spend a good deal of his money on food because he was too busy reading to work. And to such a pitch did his eagerness and infatuation go that he sold many an acre of tillage land to buy books of chivalry to read, and brought home as many of them as he could get. But all of there were none he liked so well as those of the famous Feliciano de Silvia's composition, for their lucidity of style and complicated conceits were as pearls in his sight, particularly when in his reading he came upon courtships and cartels, where he often found passages like, "The reason of the unreason with which my reason is afflicted, so weakens my reason, that with reason I murmur at your beauty," or again, "The high heavens that are of your divinity divinely fortify you with the stars, rid of you deserving of the desert, your greatness deserves." Really? That's a whole lot of crap. Excuse my language. Over conceits of this sort, the poor gentleman lost his wits and used to lie awake, striving to understand them and worm the meaning out of them. What Aristotle himself could not have made out or extracted had he come to life again for that special purpose. So now he's making fun of him. He's like, this guy would lay awake at night trying to figure out the deeper meanings of this Feliciano guy, who it says in our book, Feliciano de Silva was a popular 16th century Spanish writer whose works of chivalry Cervantes mocks throughout his story. So a contemporary of Thomas Malory. Keeping that in mind. Now, what's so funny is that he's saying that even though he lays awake at night trying to figure this stuff out, even Aristotle, who was a Greek philosopher, who was very smart, couldn't have figured out what in the world De Silva was saying. This is another bless his heart moment. Yep. He committed, however, the author's way of ending his book without the promise of that interminable adventure. And many a time was he tempted to take up his pen and finish it properly as there proposed, which no doubt he would have done, and made a successful piece of work of it too, had not greater and more absorbing thoughts prevented him. So, at times, as Don Quixote is reading, he is tempted to, these tales go on and on forever, and there doesn't seem to be any ending. Same with Thomas Malory. That's why we don't read all of Thomas Malory's stuff, is because it's so daggum long. And so they're saying that really Don Quixote, if he had put his great imagination to work, he could have written a better story. But there's something more pressing for him to do. Let's see what it is. In short, or not so very short, he became so absorbed in his books that he spent his nights from sunset to sunrise and his days from dawn to dark poring over them. And what with little sleep and much reading, his brains got so dry that he lost his wits. Once again, he has lost his wits twice. So in other words, he went a little bit cray-cray. He took a ride on the cray-cray train. He got derailed. Maybe I'm derailed right now. Okay. His fancy grew full of what he used to read about in his books. Enchantments, quarrels, battles, challenges, wounds, wooings, loves, agonies, and all sorts of impossible nonsense. And it so possessed his mind that the whole fabric of invention and fancy he read of was true, that to him no history in the world had more reality in it. In short, in other words, once again, another in short. In other words, it became real to him. He began to think that all these adventures were not fictional. He thought it was for real. Yeah. In short, his wits being quite gone, he hit upon the strangest notion that ever a madman in this world hit upon, and that was that he fancied it was right and requisite as well for the support of his own honor as for the service of his country that he should make a knight errant of himself, roaming the world over in full armor on horseback in quest of adventures, and putting in practice himself all that he read of as being the usual practices of knights errant, righting every kind of wrong, and exposing himself to peril and danger, from which in the issue he was to reap eternal renown and fame. Already the poor man saw himself crowned by the might of his arm, Emperor of Trebizond, Greek empire that existed from 1204 to 1461. It didn't even exist anymore. He thinks he's going to become a knight. He thinks that he can go around and become a knight. And so led away by the intense enjoyment he found in these pleasant fancies, he set himself forthwith to put his scheme into execution. He's going to become a knight. Forthwith. Immediately. Forthwith. I'm going to start using that word. RJ, pay attention to me. Forthwith. Yes, forthwith. Andrew, stop moping around. Look at me. Get your book open. Hey. Get your book open. Page 144. If you don't have your book open up your tablet or your computer and download the book that I downloaded for you, and it took me forever to get it right. So, yeah, 144. You with me? Everybody with me? Abby, are you with me? Mackenzie, stop staring off into space. Okay. The first thing he did was to clean up some armor that had belonged to his great-grandfather and had been for ages lying forgotten in a corner, eaten with rust and covered with mildew. Ew. He scoured and polished it as best he could, but he perceived one great defect in it, that it had no closed helmet, nothing but a simple morion. So just the top of it, he didn't have the shield that came down and covered your face. This deficiency, however, his ingenuity supplied, for he contrived a kind of half-helmet, a pasteboard, which fitted onto the morion, looked like a whole one. I don't know what pasteboard is, but it reminds me of cardboard, and so apparently he took a piece of cardboard and fashioned himself the rest of a helmet. Good for you, buddy. Good for you. It is true that in order to see if it was strong and fit to stand a cut, he drew his sword and gave it a couple of slashes. The first of which undid in an instant what had taken him a week to do. The ease with which he had knocked it to pieces disconcerted him somewhat, and to guard against that danger he set to work again, fixing bars of iron on the inside until he was satisfied with its strength. And then, not caring to try any more experiments with it, he passed it and adopted it as a helmet of the most perfect construction. Here's a picture of old Don Quixote. See his helmet? There's his nag. There's his armor. You go, dude. In his 40s. Gonna become a knight. Yep. He'd be crazy. He next proceeded to inspect his hack, his horse. 4 days were spent in thinking what name to give him, because, as he said to himself, it was not right that a horse belonging to a knight so famous, he's going to be so famous, and one with such merits of his own should be without some distinctive name. And he strove to adapt it so as to indicate what he had been before belonging to a knight errant, and what he then was. What is it time yet, Lily? Or what are you doing? Ooh, nice. Excuse me, my daughter just interrupted me. Hold on, I'm almost done with this chapter.
I wasn't trying to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. And he strove to adapt it so as to indicate what he had been before belonging to a knight errant, and what he then was, for it was only reasonable that his master, taking a new character, he should take a new name, and that it should be a distinguished and full-sounding one, befitting the new order and calling he was about to follow. Yes, and so, after having composed, struck out, rejected, added to, unmade, and remade a multitude of names out of his memory and fancy, decided upon calling him Rocinante, a name to his thinking lofty and sonorous and significant of his condition as a hack before he became what he now was, first and foremost hacks in all the world. Just the word hack implies it's an old nag. But he's calling him Rocinante. What does that mean? Let's take a look in our book. It's from the Spanish rocin, meaning nag, or low-quality horse, and ante, meaning before previously. So the implication is that the horse was a nag until becoming Quixote's hack. So in other words, Rocinante means before a nag. Previously a nag. Okay. Having got a name for his horse so much to his taste, he was anxious to get one for himself. And he was 8 days more pondering over this point, till at last he made up his mind to call himself Don Quixote. Quixote, that's how it's pronounced. Whence, as had been already said, the authors of this veracious history have inferred that his name, veracious, that's tongue-in-cheek, this is not true, have inferred that his name must have been, beyond a doubt, Quixada, and not Quesada, as others would have it. He, like a good knight, resolved to add on the name of his and to style himself Don Quixote of La Mancha, whereby he considered he described accurately his origin and country, and did honor to it in taking his surname from it. So then, his armor being furbished, his morion turned into a helmet, his hat christened, and himself confirmed, he came to the conclusion that nothing more was needed now but to look out for a lady to be in love with, for a knight-errant without love was like a tree without leaves or fruit, or a body without a soul. As he said to himself, if for my sins, or by my good fortune, I come across some giant hereabouts, a common occurrence with knight-errants, and to overthrow him in one onslaught, or cleave him in asunder to the waist, or in short to vanquish and subdue him, will it not be well to have someone I may send him to as a present, that he may come in and fall on his knees before my sweet lady, and in a humble, submissive voice say, I am the giant Cariculobro, Lord of the island of Maladrania, vanquished in single combat by the never sufficiently extolled knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, who has commanded me to present myself before your grace, that your highness dispose of me at your pleasure. Dispose meaning here, do what you will with me. Oh, how our good gentleman... Did y'all like my Spanish accent? That was pretty bad. That was really bad. Yeah. You couldn't do any better. Russell. Oh, how our good gentleman enjoyed the delivery of the speech, especially when he had thought of someone to call his lady. There was, so the story goes, in a village near his own, a very good-looking farm girl, with whom he had been at one time in love, though, so far as is known, she never knew it, nor gave a thought to the matter. So he had a crush on this woman and never told her. Her name was Aldonza Lorenzo, and upon her he thought fit to confer the title of Lady of his Thoughts. And after some search for a name which should not be out of harmony with her own, and should suggest and indicate that of a princess and a great lady, he decided upon calling her Dulcinea del Toboso, she being of El Toboso, a name to his mind musical, uncommon, and significant, like all those he had already bestowed upon himself, and the things belonging to him. Dulcinea means sweet, or sweetly. All right, so that was chapter 1. And here it doesn't say that she's a lady of the night. It says she's a simple farm girl. She's not a princess. But in his delusional mind, she is. So, tune back and we will go over chapter 8 next.